Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Eric Bramlett.
Max Leaman.
Brett McCracken.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I'm really excited for today's episode. Brett and I met each other in late January this year at a real estate tech hub in Boulder. Brett was the only attendee, of which I think there were only 8 of us. He was the only attendee that was invited to present, and it was really wonderful that they did ask him to present because he's incredibly knowledgeable. He knows more about lead conversion than anybody I've ever met. He's analyzed it more in depth than anyone I've ever met. Max, you were able to chat with Brett for about an hour a few weeks ago. What were your thoughts?
He's an idiot.
Nailed it. That's all you need to know.
Podcast over. No, I was very intrigued. I think we even just planned for like maybe 30 minutes on that conversation. And then the next thing I knew, it was an hour and we had other stuff that we had to get to. But I could have kept going on that for a long time. Actually, even hooked up with one of the companies you recommended as well. And so I've really been looking forward to this. If nothing else, I really like you, and I feel like we connected on so many different things that we have in common, not just in the business, but on the business, in personal life as well. So, it's awesome to have you on here today, and I'm, happy to be able to share this experience with everybody that's paying attention.
So I don't think it's even a joke. Like, we could literally just say, hey, Brett, can you tell us who you are and what you do? And he could, be interesting for over an hour. But yeah, Brett, tell us who you are, what you do. How did you get into this?
Yeah, good question. And I am like awash in light today. So there's a lot of sun coming in, but there's a lot of, it's just a bright sunny day out today. So yeah, I'm Brett McCracken, and I have been doing this work for about 18 years. I always joke with people when I got out of college, so I don't mean to brag, but first job out of college, a little place called Banana Republic. Might have heard of it. So I needed some work clothes, and literally I started working there for 50% off the discount. So I had to get some big boy clothes. But no, I started working for a company out of Kansas City at the time called Softview, did interactive marketing. And we worked with a bunch of different verticals. The company actually first started with doing remote interviews. And so you could actually record yourself doing a job interview, and that way, if someone had to interview, 25, 30 people, they could at least get a resume and a video about the person and say, okay, this is kind of my first round. One of the uses of the technology, though, came from mortgage lending. And so we had a beta client that ended up getting bought by a very large company. And what would happen is you go on the lending tree, and you have to remember this is the time when lenders were receiving their leads via fax and via email. Literally, a fax machine would be there. When they first started, they just start handing out opportunity. And so we had this little algorithm that's pretty straightforward. It's about 2005 or so, that when, let's say, Eric went online and he would fill out his inquiry, he would immediately get an email, and the algorithm would pick Max as his loan officer. And a video would come up and flash encoded and say, hi, I'm Max, say the company he's with, and they would dynamically fly in the products, 30-year fixed, 5-1 arm, whatever. And it was really revolutionary because it was one of the first times that people could see the person they're going to do business with, which really is translated to what we're seeing today is important. So that's how I got to know a bunch of banks across the country. I think we worked with probably the top 20 on purchase, refinance, the top 2 in HELOC at the time. And then I started working with lenders directly at call centers, and then just doing a bunch of technology implementations as well. And then I started to kind of put all the pieces together. And so you'd say, I got the front end opportunity coming through a workflow. It goes into a CRM. It's going over to a point of sale. It's going to a loan origination system. It doesn't matter if you're a real estate agent or if you're a loan officer. You have all these disparate data systems that you're trying to move information across. And you really try to create a digital veneer on top of all of that, which is super difficult to do. But that's where I spend most of my time, is just trying to figure out what technology should be used by the company, what's kind of their secret sauce. How do the employees use the tech in reality? Because, if you watch the sales pitch and you watch how people use the technology, there's a huge disconnect there. And then over the last 5 years in particular, what I've really been interested in is what's the consumer experience? All this money and time and energy, what actually happens when someone picks up and calls the toll-free number, or they fill out a form on your website and they said, hey, call me. And so I've been doing a lot of study on that. It's been pretty eye-opening.
It's awesome. And then you've recently moved into the real estate space as well, correct?
Yeah. Most of it's been banking, credit unions, but over the past about year and a half, we've been shopping real estate agents, brokerages, open houses, going online to websites. And now it just connects the whole experience, right? I've seen for so many years the financing side of that component of it, but now I'm actually seeing the agent side and what that experience is like. When you put the two together, It's wild.
I mean, clearly the agents are much better, right? I mean, you have these heartless bankers that,
Yes.
that don't know how to connect with human beings, but all of the agents, I mean, there's just no reason to even secret shop them, right? I mean, your work is done.
That's it. It's Wall Street versus UNICEF. It works out really well, and two completely different groups. Yeah. Yes. We're going to go with what you said, Eric. It's your podcast.
Thank you.
I would imagine that when you compare the bankers, loan officers to the real estate agents, and then kind of beyond into just any sort of sales type role that you're secret shopping, I would imagine the issues are pretty much the same across the board. Not asking the right questions, not following up, not paying attention, all of that. Like, as you're going through that, what is it that you're looking for when you're secret shopping, whatever it may be? And do you, I mean, obviously you have to kind of switch it up, because if you're asking about a house versus a loan, there's going to be a different dialogue. But do you look for different things, or is it all just it's kind of the same across the board as to what you're looking for?
Yeah, great question. There's a colleague of mine who used to work with the guys at Stratmore, and they've got amazing data on the banking side. But a colleague of mine, Garth Graham, wrote an article, I think it was last year. Essentially, it's titled "Be Human," and he gave this example. If you go to a party, right, someone's having a cocktail party at their house, and Eric says to me, "Hey, I'm buying a house." Right? I'm probably going to say, "Oh, it's awesome. We're looking to buy. What's going on in your life?" You're just going to have a very human conversation. It's funny when you talk to salespeople if they've done this for 5 years, they've done this for 25 or more years. They get to the point, right? How weird would it be if Eric were at a cocktail party and we just met and he says, "I'm thinking about buying a house." And I say, "Oh yeah, how much are you putting down? What's your credit score? How's your income looking? Your assets. How long have you been at your job for?" And that's what happens. When you shop as a consumer, I think that if you do this job day in and day out, it's second nature to you. Someone can wake you up at 2:00 in the morning. You just fire off the questions that you need to ask so you can start framing up your deal. So one of the first things we look at is someone human? Do they actually say what's going on in your life? Right? Do they actually ask you the questions about that? And I would say 9.9 out of 10 times when we do these shops, and we've done a lot of them, we never get the most basic question, which is, so why are you buying a house? Why are you moving? Is it a job, family? What's going on? That opens up a whole other set of conversations. So that's the first thing we look for. The second aspect that we look for on it is what questions do they do ask us? What do they do with those questions? So a lot of times when we shop, we're doing it for one of our clients. And so we have access to their CRM, whatever their platform is for opportunity management. A high percentage of the time, if we make a direct phone call, never goes into their CRM. So what's the problem there? Number one is any drip marketing campaigns you would send out, that's gone. You don't have an email address, you have a phone number, you don't know this person exists. The second thing is for a follow-up conversation. So I was talking to a client of mine, and it was a retail group, right? Very well-known credit union. And I was interviewing one of the loan officers, and I said, he was a few minutes late meeting with me. So he said, "I'm so sorry, I was meeting with somebody, they're getting ready to buy their first home." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." "Oh, he's about 6-12 months out from buying a house. They're saving up for the down payment." And I said, "So your notes, like, what do you do with those when you talk to them?" "I put on a notepad here." I said, "What do you put in a platform? You put in a system?" "No, really, I don't." And I said, "So let me ask you a question. If that guy and his wife return in 6 months or 12 months, what's your conversation going to be?" And he was totally transparent, very honest. He said, "Really, he's going to have to probably repeat everything he just said to me." Right? So that's one of the things we look for there. And then another thing we also look for is how does the conversation, how does the interaction end? If somebody just spent 5 minutes or 25 or 35 minutes on the phone with us, do they end by asking for that next meeting? Do they end by saying, "Are you free next Tuesday between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.? Or at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m.? Do they give us a binary choice to pick from? Or do they say, "Great, I'm going to send you an email with my contact information. Just feel free to reach out whenever you have time"? And that's definitely the majority, if they even do send a follow-up email, whether it's a real estate agent or a loan officer. We've actually found through the shops, real estate agents are far, far less likely to ask for our contact information and ever follow up with us.
It's because they're playing pickleball, or they're I'm trying to think of another funny example. Agents are all over town. I will say one of the obstacles that we run into whenever our agents are working leads is you have to be in that mindset of, I'm going to work leads, I'm working right now. And we've gone back and forth on saying like, "Oh no, you can be mobile, you can drive or whatnot while you're doing it." And it really doesn't end well. Like, I'll listen to calls. Somebody answers the call while they're driving. They what you're supposed to ask, but you're not taking notes. If I ever listen to a call and somebody is driving, the only move is to say, hey, can you hold on for 1 second while I pull over so I can take some notes.
What do you do from a follow-up perspective? Most of us come from the approach of you don't want to be pushy, you want to be here. We're your resource, we're your advocate. And I'm taking notes here because I have a whole lot to say about all of this. But as a loan officer, nobody wants to be, and as an agent too, you don't want to be that used car salesman. We always talk about used car salesman. As a loan officer, we talk to a customer, we get their story. Maybe we're human, maybe we're not, but we get all of this information. Then we're going to send them typically a link to fill out an application. We're going to then go through, or you take the app over the phone, either way. Then you're going to want to get these documents. You'll set up a time to talk. You now go through, okay, here's all the different scenarios we're talking about. I send you estimates. We look at those. Then I send the email to you and your agent that says you're pre-qualified. And then what? Because as a loan officer, you're like, I'm here if you need me, and you can check in. But you need to set that next appointment to stay in front of them. So what is the best way to do that? How do you do that? What are you asking for? What are you setting the next appointment for, and when? What is your advice to a loan officer on that front?
Yeah, there's something you said just a moment ago I really want to focus on. You said you send them a link to apply, right? And that definitely worked during COVID. When rates are in the 2s and 3s, depending if you're in a 15 or 30-year term, because you're handing out water in the desert, right? If someone's doing a rate term or even a cash out refi, again, going back to that binary concept, do you want to save $482 a month and take 7.5 years off your term? That's a very easy decision to make. And so I had a client, they had an LO who he would do upwards of 70 to 75 funded units per month. And he did not get special treatment. He didn't have a loan officer's assistant. He didn't have a special operations team. He was just like everybody else. He was very good at getting on the phone in that environment, right? He would get him a quote very quickly. They had a great system for generating quotes, by the way, which most banks and credit unions do not have an IMBs. Right. We'll talk about that later. And he would say, here's the deal. Here's the quote. I'm going to send you a link to apply online. You need to get your documents up within 5 days, and here's what's going to happen. He would just walk them through the process, and they would do it. People very much got used to that. And it wasn't just COVID, right? This definitely happened before the meltdown when you needed to fog a mirror. This definitely happened with quantitative easing. So in 2012, everybody's having a pretty good party there. Then they kind of got hit in the face in May of 20. We had a bailout kind of early in 2019, which led into COVID. And so there were a number of layups that happened. And I've always felt that while I love the point of sale technology, which is going to facilitate that online application, it's become a very dangerous crutch. Because now I'm going to say, Max, I'm going to send you a link to apply online. Well, what's that done? Number one, puts the sale in your court. And number two, you're going to go fill out the application on your own, hopefully. What's the other way around? I've noticed that the best salespeople, let's talk about loan officers for a second. They remind me of really good pediatricians. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that video of the pediatrician. He kind of makes the noises and the kid's sitting there and he kind of made bop, bop, bop. And he takes the needle and he gives the kid the injection. The kid doesn't even know it. The best LOs I've ever seen are the ones that they're having a very nice conversation with you. And in the natural course of the conversation, they're filling out that 10 of what do you do for a living? Oh, that's good. How long do you work there for? Yeah, what do you do? Oh, that sounds like fun. They ask you questions. And they're just sitting there kind of typing away, right? So the number one recommendation I have for people, if you're in sales, I say if you're a loan officer, you're even a real estate agent, never push people off to an online application because there's so much of that relationship you're going to build when you ask, how about your children, when you ask about their spouse. If you think about it, you learn more information about a loan officer that person's best friend doesn't know about them. You don't know what their trade lines are. As your best friend, you don't know what their credit score is, their income, their assets. You don't know all these things, but a complete stranger gets that information from you over the phone, the first phone call. Well, that's a lot of trust, right? And then the second thing is, if I just spent an hour on the phone with you, Max, and then Eric calls me, do I really want to go over with Eric for an hour on the phone as well? No.
So the counter to that, if I'm a loan officer and I'm doing 2 or 3 or 4 deals a month, no problem. What do you say to the loan officer that's doing 25, 50, 75 deals a month that says, how do I scale that? How do I have time to spend 30 minutes to an hour with every one of these clients filling out the loan application where I can ask these questions, some of these questions in the initial call and get to know this person, but now taking the loan application, sending them up. So how do you bridge that gap? Where do you go from there? What is the answer?
It depends on where the rate is. if you're in a rate environment where the wind's at your back and you're doing a 3.5, 30-year fix, then absolutely, here's my link, go apply online, go, because you know you're gonna turn it. If you are doing 2 to 3 funded units per month, you certainly have time to get to know that individual. And the other thing I think about too is I think about the number of salespeople who don't really play the long game. It depends on what your model is, retail versus consumer direct, right? A consumer direct's a call center. And I had a client with a consumer direct guy. He said one time, it's a 30-day gig, brother. It's a 30-day gig. He always thought I'm only as good as the next 30 days. He never thought about daisy chaining all these opportunities. Yet he sat 2 chairs away from a guy in his call center. He'd take maybe 20, 23 leads from the company a month, but he would fund in a good rate environment 15 to 17 loans a month. And I called him up. I was getting ready to speak at an event, and he's not been in the industry for 9 years. He's been 100% out of the industry for 9 years. I called him up because he stuck out in my mind as one of the people who, it's not like he was closing all the 20 or 23. He was closing the same amount that month as a percentage of everybody else did of those leads. He was just getting so many referrals. And I'm just asking, what was your secret? This is going to sound a little cheesy, but I really feel that every opportunity I got that day was the only opportunity I was ever going to get that entire day. And I would treat that person. He's a very nice gentleman. And so he told me that even today, 9 years after he's left the industry, he still has people ping him on LinkedIn, say, hey, can you refinance my rental property in Las Vegas in my primary house? He was just that good. So I think it really depends. To answer your question, I think it depends on the environment. If rates are low, yeah, you got to go fast because they want to get their cash, they want to get their savings. But if you have time right now, I think it's really where you build the relationship because people like to do business with people they like.
It's an observation, and to connect this with one of our previous guests, Brittany Hodak, Max, we're in the business of creating super fans. It's cheesy, but that's what we're doing. That's the first impression. To tie it back to real estate, you can email people these same questions, or you can take them over the phone in a conversation. The important questions on a buy, right? And you're gonna build so much more rapport on that initial phone call. From my perspective, it is time well invested that will save you more follow-up time on the back end because you're speaking with fewer people and you're following up less whenever you've established a really strong relationship from the get.
So on the lending side, one of the big issues right now because of the rate environment, also what is today? Today is April 10th. CPI came out today, hotter than expected, although I wasn't surprised. And then you have a 10-year auction that, surprise, inflation's worse and no one wants to buy our debt. So, mortgage backs opened off, rates being off 1/4 to 3/8, and now they're off basically a 0.5 point from where we were yesterday. So this is tough. And with rates being where they are, consumers are really hyper-focused on that, right? Do you find in talking to these different companies and loan officers, how do I want to ask this? Consumers are going to shop, but I imagine the people that are being human have a higher success rate of maybe not having to be the absolute bottom barrel cheapest every time. The next logical loan officer question that you get is, well, how much of a difference can I sell a 1/4 different in interest rate? Is it a 1/2 different in interest rate? Like, do you have any of that data? What does that look like where all of a sudden the consumer's like, yeah, that maybe lender A is a 0.5 point worse or a 1/4 point worse, so we're going to stick with them. Have you ever tracked that metric? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's talk about the first thing. I'm amazed how often we secret shop loan officers. We've secret shopped everyone from the largest banks that have their names outside of stadiums to the smallest IMBs, the independents, right? And everyone in between. It is very common we go on the first call and we go straight for it. What's the rate? What's the fee? Right? We want to see, do they try to deflect? Do they try to ask questions? Do they go right to a rate and fee without any questions being asked or trying to get no's? The number of times an LO will say to us, well, they certainly are as low as they were 2 years ago. Or they'll say, well, pricing was a lot better on Friday than it is today. Okay. That kind of makes you feel like when you drive by the gas station, you see, let's say gas is $4 a gallon, right, depending on where you live in the country. And then you drive by a week later and it's $4.50. You wish you didn't see the 4, you wish you filled up then, right? So I'm amazed at how many people, if we don't even know what's going on, we never saw the price, they tell us, well, rates are a lot higher than they were a week ago or a couple of years ago, right? So that's the first thing. It's kind of a bit of a Debbie Downer. The second question I think you look at is you ask the question, do you have to be the bottom of the barrel? If you talk to any salesperson, they always say that I lost on rate. I lost on rate, lost on fee, right? So I'll talk to a consumer direct loan officer, but they'll tell me the reason they lost the deal and the purchase deal is because the agent said, go with my local guy. I've never heard of this company. They're going to screw up your closing. You're going to have all your stuff packed up on a Friday, and you're not going to close for 3 days because they're going to mess something up at the last minute. And then I talk to the retail loan officers and I say, when you lose a deal, what happens? Well, I lost a consumer direct guy because he had a lower rate, lower fee. Okay, so I always hear two sides of the same coin. So you say, well, how can you actually take a look at this and say, what can we point to say, do you have to be at the bottom of the barrel? Rocket Mortgage, you look at this up on their filings, between 2021 and 2023, spent over $3 billion on marketing. Someone's paying for that. And their cost in terms of employees, commissions, and benefits was a little over $8 billion, right? So there's $11 billion in expense that you have to pay. For the longest time, I didn't have many clients that were losing to Rocket. Now they're price matching. Right? I see it happening a lot more. I talk to clients of ours that say, yeah, Rocket's going to match our price. But for the longest time, they didn't price match. They were proudly priced. And say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, in 2009, I think that their market share was about 1.9%. And in 2021, they were over 7% of all mortgage business, right? So that just goes to show, if you've got marketing, if you have technology, at least the perception of technology, right? Push button, get mortgage, and you have your JD Power. We've been ranked 10 years in a row. We're the #1 lender in America. That's social proof that maybe makes people comfortable. And because of that, you're willing to pay a premium for that security and that comfort. So there's definitely a group of people that I think will do a deal at a higher price because they're not going to go shopping. And I thought about this actually quite a bit. This is a thesis I have. I'm curious if you guys agree, if there's anybody watching. It seems to me that the higher the risk or the more money involved, the less we shop, versus if it's a lower cost but something we interact with every day, we really research. I'll give you a very specific example. I've noticed that people, they go to Lowe's or Home Depot, if they're shopping for a washer or dryer, they appear to have done weeks of research on that washer and dryer. And they're going to ask every question, are you going to price match this? And I found over here, they deliver and they go through it. Yet if someone shows up for their 401k plan administration at their company, guy comes in or gal comes in with a nice suit on, there's a BMW parked outside, and they talk about asset allocation, all these pretty charts and graphs. Do they ask what's a 12B1 fee? What's the expense ratio? How much is this costing me? Should I do active versus passive managed funds? We don't ask those questions. And this is maybe $1 million portfolio somebody has, right? And so I think that sometimes people say, I got to get a mortgage. I just want to check it off my list and get the house. So am I really going to go shop?
So I think some of that is, as Eric would say, super hyper local, right? Depending on the demographic of where the consumer is. We're in Austin. Historically, Austin is one of the least profitable cities for mortgage lending. I actually wrote something down. I was waiting for you to say, from what I've been told and what I've read, and it's been a couple of years, but Rocket figured out that roughly 80% of people do not shop for a mortgage. So I was waiting for you to sit there. I put 80% down on there if that was going to be, Austin specifically, I would say 80% of the people, maybe even more, do shop and they get pre-qualified with one. Then when it comes time to go under contract, that's when they shop. And that's when somewhat of the price wars start, well, why didn't you give this to me up front? Well, we can't make livings if all we're doing is going straight to the bottom every time. And it's different. And you see that too, like a loan officer in Austin is going to make a lower commission than a loan officer in another part of the country or other parts of Texas or whatever. That's all in there. What I find very interesting is when a customer shops and they're like, well, 1/8 of a point in rate makes a big difference. And you're like, well, it's $20 a month and we're talking about $500,000. And I've asked people this, do you know what you pay your CPA? Do you know what you pay your financial advisor? They don't, right? Exactly. And you can go and show like, look here, what I find interesting, most people seem to treat interest rate as a status. And like it's really, really important. Well, my friend just got this. Well, sure, but what was their price? How much did they put down? What is their credit score? How many points did they pay? We talk about Rocket. Rocket's awesome at saying, here's your rate, and then you get it, and there's 4 points on there, and you have to go and do all of that. So I think to answer your question, I think it depends on where you are in the country. Most of the country, I think, is the way that you've described it, but I think some areas are not.
I think I think lenders are in the unfortunate position that you are selling money. So it is hyper focused on every dollar and cent from the get-go. That's specifically what the conversation is about. From my perspective, if I were an LO, I think that I would really lean on service and really lean on service that I'm going to provide after the sale and try to shift that conversation to what's actually important. I will say that my experience as an agent and as a high producing agent for a long time, it was remarkable how little the commission came up, like how few and far between it was that somebody would be hyper focused on what my commission was on the sell side, and it wasn't really discussed on the buy for a whole litany of reasons we're all discussing right now. But I think that's why you're in a uniquely difficult position, Max. I think that's why your clients are in a uniquely difficult position, Brett.
Well, and I think I'm curious, Brett. One of the things that I really preach now is number one, and I heard this from somewhere, I'm stealing it from someone and calling it my own, but when a consumer asks what's the rate, it's because they don't know what else to ask.
Yes.
Right? So you have that. So number one, you need to start educating, because to your point, if I talk to a consumer and they say, what's the rate? I go, well, let's talk about it. What are we doing? Like, let's discuss and let's tailor. But then 36 months from now, when you're secret shopping, do you see it? Like, how often is that coming up?
So if we shopped at different LOs, if we can shop at the same company, we can shop at different companies. There is no, probably 98 times out of 100, there is no financial advice going, right? So for example, they don't ask about your monthly cash flow. They don't ask when you think about retiring. They don't think about what other investments are you thinking about making, right? What can you do with this money? They'll say, hey, have you ever thought about why rich people don't pay cash for a house? They don't really have that conversation. They have the money, but why don't they pay cash? Well, they have that cash they want to allocate to other assets that they think are going to generate more money for them. And so we don't get that conversation. Sometimes if it's a bank, let's say, that is in a unique position, they're going to keep that paper on the portfolio. It is very rare that you would hear a loan officer explain something to the effect of, we have an interest saver program. So you can actually make biweekly payments. Let me explain how this happens. At the end of the year, you're making one extra month, one extra payment. It's all going to principal, and we're putting you on a 30-year amortization, and I'm going to take off 8.5 years of your loan, and that's going to save you $52,000 interest, whatever the numbers are. They don't walk you through the options, and they don't offer what I would call decision simplicity, right? And I think that's what most consumers want. They want 2 or 3 options, and they want someone to introduce decision simplicity to help them decide. And so if it's somebody who's maybe going to be getting a new job, or maybe they want to put them on a 30-year amortization, but they say, look, you're making enough money. You can definitely make additional payments. There's no prepayment penalty, but you don't have, you have a child getting ready to go to college. You don't really have a ton saved up in your emergency fund, but you make pretty good monthly money in your income. So why don't I get a payment that you're going to sleep well at night and not be stressed out about, versus taking you to the absolute max of what you can afford, right? That conversation almost never happens.
It's amazing. And if it does, now you have trust. And to decision simplicity, I'm stealing that also moving forward. But that's it. They want to see options, and then they want you to tell them which one they should take. So like one thing that I try to practice is, here's a couple of options, even though I know some of them are not good for them. And then we talk about why. Why should we not do this? Why should we do that?
There's trust.
From my perspective, when somebody asks you, what's the rate? You might just spitball them the lowest rate and say, let me explain to you why you probably don't want that. Right now, if I'm buying, I'm certainly not selecting the lowest rate, because I know that I'm refinancing in a couple of years. It's a certainty.
I'm surprised that more people don't take that question head on. So if I'm the loan officer, and we've been talking for a few minutes, I kind of get to know you and say, okay, Rick, here's the number one question everyone asks: what's the rate? And
that's phenomenal.
It's always the wrong question to ask, and let me tell you
right.
why. Versus, now you're a bit more offensive versus defensive, right? And I think what somebody really wants is someone they can trust that's going to give them good, sound financial advice, right? I'm amazed. I listen to a lot of call recordings. I'll give you guys a little bit of background. I've gone through multiple phases of this. First, I used to kind of sit in a room and just look at data, and I made a bunch of decisions off data. I never thought, is my data clean? I never thought, if I do have contaminated data, how contaminated is it? Because as I talked about, moving data from multiple disparate databases. And then I was working in call centers. And so I would hear half of a conversation. And I was like, I wonder what happened to the other half of that conversation. conversation. And then I started listening to call recordings. And so I went from having this abundance of quantitative data, and I realized when I'm trying to put a puzzle together, what I was missing was the qualitative data, was the actual interactions. And once I started listening to call recordings, then I completely understood the data. I understood why a conversion rate on lead source A was 2.1%, lead source B was 5%. And then it came full circle when we started secret shopping. Now you know what you're looking for, whether you're talking to a real estate agent or you're talking to a loan officer. When we get on these calls, I'm the dumbest person you've ever met in terms of getting a home loan. It's just, if you say, well, you might have PMI, you say TMI. Oh, what is that? What does that protect me for? Is that what's that insurance for? Right. And I ask these questions. What are points? Right. And we'll play the role of I'll be a third grade teacher that's a geography teacher. Right. I make it crystal clear. I'm not sure. Or sometimes we'll have somebody play the role of the wealthy guy who has definitely done this before. He's going to bull charge you and, going to be very arrogant about how much money he earns and all that. Right? So we have all these different profiles that we test.
Brett, can you, because I want to hear about secret shopping specifically. I mean, for no other reason than will probably be the most entertaining part of the podcast and the stories. Would you mind, tell us about Five Guys Burgers and what that means?
Yeah. So years ago, I was on an elevator just outside of DC. It was a slow elevator in a tall building. So we had plenty of time together. And there were two people who were talking. And one person was saying to the other, it was kind of right when I walked onto the elevator. No, I'm telling you, if I was on death row, I would definitely get the Five Guys such and such burger with the Cajun fries. And that would be my last meal on earth. Right. And I had never eaten at a Five Guys. And I wasn't really familiar with it. Right. I just, at the time when I heard it, I didn't know. And I remember stepping off the elevator thinking, I've never heard of this company. I thought maybe it's just hyper local, and they've been expanding quite a bit by then. And I thought that's pretty impressive. I don't see any commercials on TV saying how great the product is, and this person says that would be their last meal. And so I started looking into them, and what I didn't know was about the sixth guy. And so what Five Guys does is the program, instead of putting millions and millions of dollars into TV marketing to make the burger look like something you're definitely not going to get when it comes out of the back, they secret shop their roughly locations throughout the world twice a week. So that's about 100 shops per year that they do. So every week, two individuals are going to walk into that Five Guys, and they're going to secret shop you for cleanliness, quality of the burger, the whole thing. If you are working on that shift and you get a good score, then there's a bonus. So they spend tens of millions a year in not only the program, obviously paying for the shoppers, paying for the food, but also for the folks who are working, they give them a bonus for that. And I just thought, what a great way to spend your money, of inspecting what you expect. Instead of saying, oh, we're so great, come use us, go make sure that when you have someone walk into a restaurant, that it's a 5-star experience. And I think what's unique is that every person who works at Five Guys knows that week there's going to be two individuals walking in, and they are going to secret shop you. So that's why I'm a big fan of, I think every company should do that.
Can you tell us a little bit about, you decided to move into the real estate space and started secret shopping the real estate space. Can you tell us about that decision? Can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen as you've moved into that space?
Yeah. So our mutual friend, Mike Del Preti. So I can thank him for this, is that I had seen Mike's presentations at Inman, and I just watched online. I was always so impressed with the way that Mike takes very complicated topics and he distills them down. He does a really nice job with his visuals, and he does a nice job of threading his research together to tell a story. And so he was recently presenting on something called the last mile problem. And it just resonated with me so well. He talked about, hey, did you see the Saturday Night Live skit where they talked about Zillow and then, being harassed at the very end from the real estate agent? So he goes through this whole thing. You can Google it, and he does a really nice job online. But I reached out to Mike, and I said, it's funny, decide what you just described on the real estate side. And so we get to talking about it, and he said, well, let's just shop agents. The same thing. I showed him what we were doing for banks and IMBs. And he said, let's do the same thing for agents. So we're in the middle of it now. We are shopping all over the country. We have people walking in physically. We're doing online. We're filling out inquiries online, and it's borderline breathtaking what happens
in a good way, right?
I wish, if not asking for someone's contact information. When you go online, you fill out a form and you say, I'm interested in this property. You have not disqualified yourself in any way. You've given your name, your email, and your phone number, and it typically pre-fills. It says, I'm interested in 123 Main Street. It's already pre-filled. You hit submit. First of all, there's a number of people who just never call you. They never contact you. And I've talked to some brokers and they said, well, we get a lot of spam that comes through, so we just don't call any of those. Okay. One, I totally respect the fact that there's some junk that comes through there. But two, is there a better way that can be handled that, let's say, 50 spam deals come through, but 10 legitimate ones. That adds up over time. And so the online experience has been interesting. We're going to produce a report about that later this year. And then the in-person shopping has been really surprising as well. I would think if you're face-to-face with a human being, you have got a huge leg up on a call center, right? Someone who's just going to be a voice on a phone. And you probably don't even pick up your phone if it says spam likely. And so I'm amazed by how little of a connection. We've had people walk in and they've said, great. They've been the only person there. They said, can you show me around? And the real estate agent said, oh, no, you can just go ahead and show yourself around. They just sat in the kitchen, right? I had experience as well. I do these shops too, so I like to have experience. I shopped a really nice home. I got all dressed up, and it was on a very snowy day that I went there. Nice neighborhood. Sales price was around $650, if I recall correctly. And it was just me in the house. I remember I put on the shoe booties, but my shoes were still kind of wet, so I just took my shoes off. So I want to, get it throughout the house. I want to be very respectful of their home. And I probably talked to the agent for 70% of the time I was there for about a half hour. Never asked my name, never asked my phone number, never asked my timeline. The only question he asked was, do you want to see the disclosures from the sellers? He goes, I can get you a copy of that. And the reason I bring that one up is because I drive by that house at least 4 times a week. And now I see reduced price, new price.
Well, and what's interesting about that, if you're sitting in open house and you're trying to sell that specific house, it's a low likelihood, right? The likelihood that you're going to walk in and you're going to like that house, I don't know the percentage. I'm guessing a couple of percent. But if you're sitting in the open house and your goal is to also pick up a client, if that house isn't for them, that's a massive wasted opportunity. That guy the value of his time there was close to zero whenever he could have made it incredibly valuable time.
Yeah. And he even said to me, he said, that because it was so snowy that day, he said, there's no looky lose out today.
Right.
He said, people are out here today. They came out, and I even joked to myself, I put my long johns on just to come see this house. I'll tell you what, another thing we find is pretty amazing. The number of times online, a home will say it's open from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. or 8 to 5, and we show up and it's not open.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
You said something about the spam calls. Andrew Lamacchia, I saw him once, and I thought it was interesting. He goes, who doesn't answer the phone when it says spam likely if you don't know the number? And a lot of people raise their hands. And he's like, I answer every time. You always answer. Spam likely, but not definite. And you can always just hang up on them. But letting the phone go to voicemail is a problem. And we preach that, right? Speed delete, answer the phone, don't let it go to voicemail. All of those things. So I think it's interesting that people don't.
I will say this, Max, I think that it's your responsibility and my responsibility to reduce the spam as much as we possibly can, because it's human nature to want to be successful. And whenever you think that there's a high likelihood that this is going to fail, you're not as motivated to answer that call. You're not as motivated to call those people if you have a lot of crap coming in. Brett, that's why I love what you do, because you start the secret shop from the web form all the way through. Have you looked at spam control measures? I mean, I know that I'm constantly trying to, and I'll talk about it offline because it's very specific, but we're constantly trying to, figure out how to separate the BS marketer calls that come in, on our marketing line, and the agents pick it up and they get demoralized. I'd love to hear what you have to think of that.
Yeah. So two aspects of this. Number one, spam likely is becoming more prevalent, especially if people have dialers. But I'll tell you something else that's kind of amazing is when you first are trying to get in touch with a company, it's not rare that they will give you 4 different phone numbers to call. There will be a number on their website. They will send you a text message from one number if they're TCPA compliant, and not everyone's TCPA compliant. So I'd be definitely concerned if I was that. Quick side note on that, for those that don't know, anytime someone fills out a form and you want to call them with an auto dialer, you want to send them a text message, you have to have the language that opts them in. We've all seen it on there. If you don't have that on your website, and you could be fined for up to $500 per text message. And if you're considered willfully ignorant of the law, it's $1,500 per text message. So Jiffy Lube, the oil company Jiffy Lube, they found this out the hard way. They sent a bunch of people a text message that says, hey, do you want to opt in to our text messaging? Well, about $50 million later in a lawsuit, they had to pay out. They learned that's not a thing you want to do. So they'll send you a text message, and in the text they'll say, hey, we're going to call you from this number. which is different from what's on the website, which is different from the text, which is different from the number they expect. Well, that's what the technologist set up. And then what does a salesperson do? They call from their cell phone. So now I have 4 different phone numbers that I reach. Okay. So now let's talk about spam calls versus properly branded caller ID. Rocket, they'll call you 17 times in 3 days, and you'll just see, depending on which trunk line they're using, spam likely, it just goes down. You look at the missed calls. I'm seeing this happen more and more now with companies getting flagged as spam likely if they're a high dial shop. If you're not making 20, 30,000 calls, in a month, you're likely less likely. I'll tell you the companies I'm really impressed with. I don't know who is responsible at telephony, like for US Bank. When US Bank calls you, will say US Bank, it will have the individual's name, and it'll actually have their title as well.
That's a new program from the carriers, and I think it's to keep everybody's nose clean, right? If you opt into that, and then you really care about your reputation, right? It will cause you to care more about your reputation whenever you opted into it, right?
It takes a long time to do because the telephone carriers are, we all think there's the big telephone carriers. Well, there's a lot of them, right? There's hundreds of them, right? Mm-hmm. And if they could be in small municipalities and they don't all update their database on a regular basis. So you may call one day and your caller ID comes through fine, but then you call somebody else that's in some other geographical location they've not updated for a year. They don't know about the new caller ID. So it takes a long time to make it work. But that's a major thing that I would make sure if I'm a business owner, I want to make sure that my branded caller ID shows up when I call somebody.
Yeah. Text messaging, the playing field is changing. I mean, as we speak, the carriers have become very serious about cracking down on text spam. Have you seen any of your clients deal with that recently? I mean, I know there's some high volume outbound text campaigns. Are those going away? I hope you're going to say yes.
Well, no, I don't think they're necessarily going away. I think people are trying to play within the law. But if there's ever a place that I think there's going to be serial plaintiffs, I've had some clients get hit before the serial plaintiff, right? So what's a serial plaintiff? It's somebody, and let's say, I'll give you a very specific example. They live in a condo somewhere in South Florida. The law firm's out of DC. It's a one-room office, and they either use software or they go online and they look to see if your website is ADA compliant. If it's not, here comes the threatening letter, and they're going to shake you down for cash, and they just do this over and over and over again because the person who went online has an eye issue or something where they can't use your website, so therefore you're discriminating against them, right? I could easily see with robocalls, and we're seeing now in text messaging, once there's enough money to be made off that, I could see that becoming the next mesothelioma. Did you live or work at Camp Lejeune during these time periods? If there's money to be made, there's going to be serial lawsuits, but I would just be super buttoned up on my TCPA compliance. I would be stamping everything when it comes in, making it easy to opt out.
So back to the secret shopping, because this is my favorite part. What's the worst LO experience you've had? And then what's the worst? No, you know what? Let me qualify. Not the worst. What's the funniest secret shop experience you've had with an LO, and then followed up by the funniest secret shop experience you've had with a real estate agent?
And who were they by name? What's their phone number? What company are they with?
Okay, I'll tell you a funny one we had. We don't just do this online and over the phone. We sometimes do this in person. So we have this great client. It's a well-known bank. Everybody would know if I said it. We don't just shop them. They also want us to shop their competitors. And so they said, hey, would you do us a favor? We want you to walk into the physical branches. So the same day, we've done it multiple times, but the same day in particular, a colleague of mine and I, in 2 different cities in the country, we walked in and we had near identical experiences. His branch was empty, my branch. There were 3 people in front of me, 2 people behind me, 5 people working at the branch, and there were 2 people at the desk who ended up leaving. They were customers, but they did their business and left. So I get to the front, and the instructions were very specific. You want to have the highest yield you can for 12 months because you're going to make a large purchase. Don't say what the large purchase is. Just keep hinting at. You want to make as much return as you can, but you need this money liquid for your large purchase. So they want to see, are they going to, is it a car? Is it a boat? Is it a house? So I wait in line. And one of the funny things, by the way, the coin machine was on the side, and someone wrote, "Coin machine is for customers only," with about 12 exclamation points. I just thought to myself, who was so pissed off about this coin machine? Like, who's using coins? And so I just remember seeing that sign. So I get up to the front and I talk to the gentleman who's there, tell him what I'm looking to do. And I said, I just, want to put 50,000 into an account, and I just want to be able to get it out within about a year. So he tells me, okay, great. So he never asked me what the money's for. So if you're a bank executive and you wonder why you don't cross-sell very much, it's because the people at the front typically don't ask questions. So finally, I just say to him, well, it's a buy, right? And he said, oh, congratulations, that's great. And I said, you know what, while I'm here, I actually like to apply for a home loan if I could. At this point, there's 2 people behind me, a couple people through the drive-through, but there's 1 person working it. And there's still, 3 more employees that are working over there. And he said, he gives me his card and he says, well, I'll tell you what. He said, go online and book an appointment and come back. And then he took his business card, he drew a line through his direct line. He says, don't ever call a direct line looking for me. Call the main number. I'm never at my desk. And I said, okay, well, I travel quite a bit. I'm not sure when I'll be back in town. So if I could meet with somebody, that would be great. He said, well, yeah, just go online, set up an appointment. And I'm kind of looking around. And I just thought it was so insane that here I am asking for multiple products face to face. And this guy is telling me to go home. And when he handed me his card, he had an MLS. So I knew he could originate a home loan. And he told me if he couldn't help me, one of his colleagues could. So he didn't walk me over to that colleague, right? And I go, okay, so I got to go home, make an appointment, and then come back. And he goes, yep, that's it. So I call my colleague and I said, you're not going to believe what happened today. So I tell him a story. He goes, you're not going to believe what happened today. He said, I was in a branch that was empty and I had the exact same experience. She told me, here's my card, go home. And he was there at the middle of the day. Go home, go online, set up an appointment, and come back to our branch. And he even went so far as he put a check in his notebook that looked like he was ready to put the money in and open up the account that day. And I talked to a few other people at bank with this guy. It's a big bank. And one in particular is a VIP client there for their bank. And she said, yep, we've had the exact same experience with him, which is why we left.
Do you guys remember the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin with Jonah Hill? Jonah Hill has a very small part where he goes into the "we sell your stuff on eBay" store and tries to buy some boots that she has on the shelf. And she says, no, I have to list these on eBay first. And then you have to buy them from eBay and then you can come back and pick them up. He's like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I just want to buy what you have for sale. And she makes him run through the similar experience that you went through with the home loan.
That's it.
All right. So that's bad. What about, and I need to know specifically some of my biggest competitors who did really silly stuff whenever you shop them. And I need to know who it was.
Which are the real estate agents? So we've had some pretty good ones. Well, look, I wouldn't say it's funny. I've been a little bit concerned. I always kind of joke, I look like every white guy you see at a fintech conference. I am like one vest away from just fitting in to that, right? So I have a very different experience when I shop, and I recognize that. We've had female shoppers, we've had minority shoppers. And I can definitely tell you that their experience is they have a higher probability of having a variance than we do. So female shoppers, for example, if a home loan, they're more likely to hear, well, is your husband going to be on the loan or is your dad going to be on the loan? They'll kind of get some condescending questions. We've had some shoppers that I think were, kind of blown off a little bit. Hey, I got somebody coming here in 15 minutes, so could you go, sort of a deal. So we've definitely seen some of that. And that's kind of anecdotal, right? You're just reading the reports and you're kind of drawing through the lines of what's going on. I think that, we had one guy who actually said, hey, I'm not going to ask your contact information because I'm not a salesy guy. He was the real estate agent. He openly said, I don't ask for contact information. If you want to put it down, great, but that's not my style because I don't want to pressure you. And so we talked to that. We said, well, that's kind of interesting. That's one take for how to sell. I don't know if it works for him or not, but I would think if you're the person whose home is being sold, I'll tell you one thing I would do. If my home was being sold, I would send a friend in or someone to secret shop my house to see how the agent was.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
to see
makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we had anybody who was comical. Oh, we've had some people that have done open door shops.
Okay.
And that is just a wild experience because no one's there and everything's through an app and the phone and you're giving your identification, your contact information. And some people, they are really weirded out by that. They just walk into an empty house and they don't know what to do. Like they have questions. I guess you can call them and say, hey, I had some questions about it, but open doors.
We're going to need you to go online and make an appointment.
Yeah.
And we'll get those answered for you.
Some of the iBuyer stuff has kind of been interesting. I think what's been interesting with this, and I talked about Mike about, I'm sure we'll write about in the report, is that you hear about these iBuyer companies from, investor calls or what's online about them or presentations. And then you go and you actually have the shopping experience. And it gives you a whole different perspective of their business model, something you didn't really think about until you actually tried to have the experience.
They're the next iteration of removing the agent from the transaction, which, it always sounds like I'm coming from a place of fear or that I'm threatened whenever I say, I don't know how anybody's going to completely minimize the agent's role. But, you start off with a lot of the lower fee brokers trying to reduce the role. And then with the iBuyers, they try to completely remove them from the equation. And like you mentioned, it's just not a very pleasant experience. It's weird. And, you're not going to convert a sale if no one's there to help with that sale.
Yeah. One thing that when we were at Mike's event in Boulder that my mind was really opened up to is we had a lot of brokers like you, right? We had a couple of representatives from the major brands, and we had the independents who were very much localized. And what I learned by sitting in that is there's a lot of room for several business models to work, right? It's not just one model is going to work and winner take all. Your niche and what you do, it can definitely work in your local market. What I think is going to happen as well is with the consumers and the buyers is that they'll fit into a different niche as well. There's someone who's going to go through that open door experience and they're going to be just fine with it. I've always said that they're the same kind of people that would get into a driverless taxi. And if it got into a fender bender, they would still get into another driverless taxi because they're just more comfortable kind of being on the forefront of tech. And other people would say, you insane, I'm not getting into a driverless taxi. So I think there's a model for everybody. The question is, can those models attract who their best customers are? Right. And the amount of time before their capital maybe runs out of their business model just says it's not going to work.
So on that note of technology, because I don't think anyone here is fearful of tech, where do you see like AI right now? It's incredibly powerful. You can create some really, really amazing funny images if you want to. That's the best use case I've seen for it so far.
Well, I just sent Eric one last week of me and him.
Oh, it's great. I'll pull it up here in a second. Brett, where do you see AI fitting into the equation? You know more about the funnel than literally anybody I've met. What do you think?
A few things. One, this just came out today. I've got on this other monitor here. I was pulling it up. Rocket was in the news for they're piloting their AI virtual assistant. Right. They certainly have the capital and they have the leadership with the experience to do this. And one of the really interesting lines they had is they piloted an AI virtual assistant with 325 mortgage bankers for outbound client calls in the fourth quarter of 2020. This is what it says. The assistant relates hundreds of crucial application fields, hands-free in real time, enabling bankers to be more productive. I think that is breathtaking because remember, it goes back to the number of times we'll be on the phone we'll be on a phone call with a loan officer for 26 minutes. And then we go check with, our contact who we're doing the project with. We don't show up in their LOS, their loan origination software. We don't show up in their CRM. We don't show up anywhere. So you think about 325 people making thousands of calls and this is going on. I guarantee their return on investment is going to be really good. I think two things are going to happen. Good.
No. I think what you mentioned immediately, it's an AI assistant, right? That makes all the sense in the world to me, an assistant to assist a human.
On that, because you actually just brought this up to me today. So, I know that there are AI systems out there where I can just record it and it transcribes the notes of the conversation. I've had people text those back to me and things like that. Is this technology filling out the actual loan application while they're going through this?
That's exactly what this says. It populates hundreds of crucial application fields hands-free in real time.
So what's amazing. Interesting, I took a note here. Before you said this, before we even got on this, I'm sitting here with some of the stuff we're saying, and I'm thinking, can AI fill out a loan application? We're having these conversations. So my brain, while we're going through this, I'm like, okay, well, if I can get these calls recorded and I can get these notes in the system, and there's a company out there that you had introduced me to that does that and actually gives feedback of this person mentioned their cat died and you brushed over it, or they said, they were talking about a fireplace and the picture that they're showing has a fireplace and like missing ways to connect and you should lean in here, lean in there. But even just at a more basic level, can you get these calls recorded and get these notes into the system? So at least you have a sense of, like, when I talk to somebody, my CRM's up all day. I don't talk to a customer or a real estate agent without having the CRM up and it's saying, hold on, let me get into your file so I know what the hell I'm talking about next time we chat. It's my line every time. But I'm taking those notes. But if these calls can be recorded, so you take that away, You don't have to, and they're just going in there.
You
And then
you can do it, Max, already. Trey Blanco is manually doing it right now because all the calls are recorded already, and he's uploading it somewhere and then, pasting it into the CRM. But with a bit of elbow grease, you can create a Zapier flow, something like that. With a bit of money, you can hire somebody to do it in a more elegant way. But that's 1,000,000%. You can do that today.
I mean, that's awesome. And then
You ought
to this
do it.
point,
I mean, honestly, like, you're loaded. You should just pay somebody to make this for you. So
can I borrow some money, please? What's your rate? Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this whole thing is fascinating, which then leads to the question. Because for years, people have talked about AI first it was Amazon was going to take the loan officer out of the business and all of that. Now you have these other softwares out there. Angel AI is something that I've heard about now 3 or 4 times in the last week, where they'll answer loan questions and underwrite and things like that. Where does this go? And certainly the loan officer is not going to be displaced because you still need human connection and you still need somebody that's going to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But where does this go? And what do you see for the future with real AI? We're calling it AI, but it's a spreadsheet.
Well, and and Brett, I think you were going this direction anyways, but when we say the future, like the next year, the next 2 years, like what's actionable? What could be built that you see right now with where technology is that could be built today that somebody could use in 6 to 12 months, with the right execution?
Yeah. So the first thing is if I'm a salesperson, I want to have every work call I have, I want to have it compliantly recorded, right? So you have to be very careful of that. And I don't do it, we listen to call recordings all the time and says this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes, but what does anybody really do with that? So the first thing I would do is I would want to have my platform make sure any telephony comes through, whether it's through a soft phone, a desk phone, or I would look for a CRM that has a mobile app that has telephony, so all the calls come around through there, right? Really no different than WhatsApp ringing through your phone, right? It's telephony that's an application. And the reason I would want to do it is I would want all my calls transcribed and I want all the notes put in there. And so we have seen, Max took a look at a couple of weeks ago from a company that's using OpenAI because they have the largest large language model, and they can take millions of their past calls. And that's the thing a lot of people don't understand is you need a massive amount of data to make AI actually have a valuable output for you. If you're a 5-person shop and you're going to load 10 calls into it, you're going to be wasting your time. So you might need to partner with somebody to do that. But the first thing I would use AI for is to make me a better note taker. What's my task list? What am I following up on? And then those calls are going to do sentiment scores. They're going to, I'm seeing more companies use AI for lead prioritization. So, who do I call back? I don't really like the word lead, by the way. I think it dehumanizes people. It's an opportunity prioritization. It's an opportunity for them and for you. But I'll tell you the other place I think it's going to go. And the reason I have this opinion, I'll pretext by saying, we have done so many shops. I've listened to so many sales calls. I always ask the question, what's the value of the salesperson? So let's talk about a loan officer. If you're going to pay them between 30 to 100, 110, 150 basis points, depending on what your model is, retail versus consumer direct, is the ratio of value to cost there. Okay. I think for a subset of society, and I think it's about 20, just given my experience, that companies are going to start taking all their phone calls and they're going to start looking at all of the data coming out of it. And they're going to say, what makes a deal move forward? What questions are people asking? What responses are we giving? And what is actually making someone comfortable to transact with my company? I could very much envision an experience, let's say on the lending side, where I, as a consumer, interacting with AI, it's asking me all the smart questions. I'm filling it out. And it's pretty easy to do. Maybe I'm clicking some buttons here and there. And then AI is going to present to me my actions. It's going to call the product pricing engine. It's going to, if I give it my social security, it's going to run credit. It's going to run desktop underwriting. It's going to bring everything back to show here are my deal options. And then AI is going to introduce that decision simplicity I was talking about.
Right.
Now you say, well, is this possible? It is. There's a company right now called Digital Credit Union out of Massachusetts, I believe, DCU. There was just an article that came out maybe 2 days ago in American Banker. And they even talk about the software. They use Optimal Blue and they use Blue Sage, which is a LOS point of sale technology.
All the rage.
As well, right? You go through it's nothing groundbreaking or unique, but here's what's interesting. This credit union is driving a significant percentage of people to complete an application. They pick their product. They say, this is the one I want. And they're starting to expose the secondary capabilities, which is a locking function where the consumer can actually do it. The member can actually do it. And that can go straight into operations. Well, if you look at Stratmore data, about 55% of a loan's cost is sales and marketing. MBA data, we're over $12,000 cost per loan right now. It's like 12,400, I think. That is the cost, just the cost on average to produce a mortgage, right? So for us to move money from point A to point B, I'm simplifying it, costs about $12,000 today. And so if you can get $6,000 of cost out of that because you're using AI, why wouldn't you? Right? If it's a good consumer experience. Because I think what we're doing at this point, if you look at what digital credit unions doing, they are simply exposing the tools to the consumer that historically the loan officer has only had access to. This goes back to the 90s where we had to call, American, Delta, Northwest, wherever all the airlines were. You had to say, what are the flight times and what's the cost? You had to go to a middleman to get it. Now we go online, we see it ourselves, and we can book our own flights.
So I have a question real quick on that. So you see these studies, and I own a mortgage company. Yes, it's expensive to originate a loan. In this example, we're cutting $6,000 of cost out. Most notably, that's going to be loan officer compensation. So that loan officer compensation comes out, but does pricing go down? Typically, it does. So you're saving this cost, but to what extent, right? Like how much are you really saving because you've lowered the price because you're not paying the loan officer?
If I can answer that, Max, whoever leverages the technology the best, they profit the most, right? I mean, if you look at the real estate industry, this reminds me a lot of real estate listings going from a paper book to an accessible database online. And I didn't work in the 80s or the 90s, but my gut is it was probably pretty hard to be a buyer's rep and sell more than 10 or 12 homes a year. And now you see buyer's reps, really productive buyer's reps doing 40 or 50. And I think that you'll have highly productive LOs making a lot of money, and you'll have other LOs going out of business. I think you'll have forward-thinking banks profiting with a much higher margin than banks that don't know how to leverage this technology to hire smart people like Brett to come in and make them more efficient. So it's like anything. Get there first, be really great with the new technology first, and you win. Otherwise, you're not going to win.
Yeah. Banks and credit unions in particular have a household penetration problem when it comes to mortgage products. If you ask them, hey, what's your household penetration rate? Meaning, if you look over the past 12 months, everyone who got a mortgage that's a member of your credit union, say, how many people got a mortgage and what percentage of them got it through you? And they'll tell you less than 5%, less than 10%. I've seen best in class close to 20%. So if you think only 2 out of every 10 people are going to come to you for a home loan and they're already having some banking relationship with you, that's actually really low. And so if I'm a bank or I'm a credit union in particular, I set the IMBs apart because they just don't have the same customer base unless they have a large portfolio, right? Quicken's got a large portfolio. Mr. Cooper has a large portfolio at 4 million customers. I'm going to start thinking about, okay, how do I pour all my money into marketing, awareness, branding, and into technology so I am funneling our existing customers, right? They spend all this money trying to go out and get new customers, but they don't spend a ton of money on their existing customers. And what do? They buy trigger leads. Someone else has already pulled their credit, and you may not have gotten that batch file for 24, 48 hours, right? Maybe it's over the weekend, it's been 72 hours. And so now you're calling, trying to win that business from your existing customers already gone somewhere else. And so let's talk about the cost. So let's say if you are able to reduce 50% of the cost, let's say it's $6,000 in today's money. Well, what do you do with that? Well, you have a multitude of options. If rate and fee really is what drives people's decision, and I know for some people it does. If you go to LendingTree, you're a rate fee shopper type of a person. But if you get a referral, you might just go to the referral. You might not shop around. Let's say you take $3,000 of those dollars and say, I'm going to keep it for my institution, right? But I'm going to take the other $3,000 and I'm going to apply that towards better rate, better fee, and I'm going to rebate some back basically to the consumer. Well, now does everybody win? My consumers, my customer, my members getting a better deal than they would have got my old structure, and I'm actually making more money now. So is it a win-win? That's one business model you could consider.
I like it.
Brett, this is amazing. And before I ask you what I think will be the last question, I want to show you something real quick. So this is what AI is doing for us right now. You guys can see that right there. It's pretty groundbreaking stuff, and I'm just waiting for the dollars to start falling. From
the prompt on that was make Max Leaman, successful mortgage lender. Eric Bramlett, successful real estate broker. Celebrating their success, Max has a beard and has an El Camino. Eric drives a Tesla and likes to climb and ski.
So as you
That
can
was
see,
what it gave me.
Yeah, as you can see, we really don't need any help with AI over here. We've pretty much got it handled.
That was awesome.
I have a question for you, Brett. So to wrap things up, and again, we'd love to have you on as many times as you're willing to come on. I mean, I will try not to be annoying asking you to come join us again. I'd love to call you and just pick your brain anytime.
Sure.
But to wrap up, okay. It's an amazing scenario, which I know you're going to get to more than likely sooner than later. McCracken, wildly successful. You know, you've made more money than you ever need for 3 lifetimes, but you still want to own and run a business, but money doesn't matter anymore. What is that business? What does your day look like in this scenario?
Good question. You know, I often think about as a human being, what's the best use of your time on Earth, right? You think we all have a certain amount of time. Nothing's guaranteed. You have a certain amount of time, and so something I actually think about a lot is what exists after you're gone. And I've always found that teachers are one of the best examples of a dividend that keeps getting paid for generation after generation after generation, right? And so I would say in that scenario that you gave, it would be something working with kids, and definitely kids at a disadvantage, right? I mean, the kids who went to private school, and I know they'll have their own challenges. They're going to be just fine in life, you know. They'll go to top colleges, they'll get good jobs. But for the kids that have grown up in a tough environment and they haven't had the same breaks and opportunities, if there's something with teaching them not only just the life skills, but also some of the street smart skills, some of the investing skills, you know, the amazing concept of compounding, you know, interest over time. I would say do something with kids, because I think one of the best things you can do with your time is to change the trajectory of someone else's life in a positive way. And if you think about just one kid whose life you change, let's say that kid goes on to be a doctor, a lawyer, a business person, a teacher, whatever. And then what happens to their kids and their kids' kids, right? That just goes on from generation to generation. So it would have to be something like that long after I'm gone, there's some thumbprint of me still around.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Incredibly amazing. How do people reach you if they want to find you? It's tough to find you online. So how does somebody reach out to Brett McCracken?
Yeah, most people find, you know, my phone number's on truck stop bathrooms in Oklahoma. You never know. I don't know why they're there. Yeah, no, I'm a ghost online. Yeah, good luck finding the website. But yeah, Brett, so BRETT at McCracken, MCCRACKEN 3, best way to reach me.
Thank you so much.
Or look me up on LinkedIn. You'll find me there too.
Brett, thanks for this. We barely scratched the surface. I mean, I could talk to you for 5-10 hours. I'd love for you to come back sooner rather than later. You are a wealth of knowledge and information, and just when I go back and I have my guys watch this and we talk about it, like there's so much that you've given us today. Thank you really for your time, and it's been great getting to know you, and I really look forward to continuing to get to know you and meeting in person sooner rather than later. And best of luck to you and everything that you're doing.
Yeah, you guys are welcome. Come on down. Be here for a while. So you guys aren't that far down in Austin. Just head a little further south.
We can, probably same distance to Kansas City, I guess. So
yeah, a couple hours. But hey, I know we're gonna wrap it up. I'm curious for you guys. That was a great question you asked. Put you guys on the spot. What would you guys do?
Mine's not nearly as cool as yours. Like mine involves like serving breakfast tacos before I go snowboard every day, stuff like that. So
it's a good one too.